Daniel Sports Central, we go for a college football game preview and prediction on the Myrtle Beach Bowl matchup between the Ohio Bobcats and the Georgia Southern Eagles. Two teams that have had good seasons getting to this point. You got Georgia Southern 6-6 on the season. This team has gone a bit cold down the stretch. They got up to 6 wins back in October, haven't won a game since, but they've got a chance to finish off the season strong here as they take on Ohio. The Bobcats 9-3 on the season, one of the top teams in the MAC this season. Definitely a team worth watching. We'll be over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today. Let's get started with their team trends. Georgia Southern lost App State 27-55 to finish out the regular season. So a rocky finish to the season for this team. They started the season 6-2. They were looking like a contender in the Sun Belt for sure. They were right in there as a contender, but kind of fell apart down the stretch, and this team finished out 6-6 on a 4-game losing streak. But as for Ohio, beat Akron 25-14. Nice win for them. They won their last 3 games, and overall were a pretty hot team down the stretch. So for the Bobcats, 9-3 heading into this matchup, you would think that Ohio should be the favorite. Of course, they got 3 more wins than Georgia Southern, but in fact, that is actually not the case. Georgia Southern is a 3.5-point favorite in this matchup. Main reason for that is because Ohio's quarterback, Curtis Rourke, is in the transfer portal. He is not going to be playing in this matchup, and he was a key player for this offense in Ohio this season. So that's obviously something you're going to hear a lot this bowl season, is about the transfer portal and quarterbacks that won't be playing in bowl games because they've already hit the portal. So that's obviously a bit of a downside and something that's definitely a bit of a negative factor of the transfer portal now. But games be on Saturday the 16th in Conway, South Carolina. Kickoff is 11 a.m. Eastern. This is the first bowl game to kick off of this bowl season. Over-under is 48.5, and the FPI is going on the Bobcat side 55%. So spread and FPI definitely disagree with each other. Ohio did open as a 1.5-point favorite, so that has since shifted quite a bit over the last few days. And of course, you look at the bowl history for both teams. Georgia Southern's been to 5 bowl games. They are 3-2 overall. They lost last season, won in 2020, and then lost in 2019. So kind of a split in results there for Georgia Southern. But as for Ohio, they're 6-8 overall. They've won their last 3 bowl games in 2018, 2019, then last year in 2022. Your stat comparison: Georgia Southern 37th in points per game this season, 106th in points allowed. This is not a very good team defensively, that's for sure. And if you look at how this team played down the stretch, I mean, allowed 45 to Texas State, allowed 38 to Marshall, 55 to App State in their last matchup. So the defense, especially the pass defense, has been an issue for the Eagles this season. But in the passing game, this is a strong passing offense. You got Davis Brin, who has passed for 3,400 yards on the season, 22 touchdowns. Problem is, he's thrown 16 interceptions. He turns over the ball a lot, and that's something that's lost this team a lot of games this season. And I mean, that's going to be a key factor in this one, is not turning over the ball. And that's really the factor for a lot of bowl games, is whoever can win the turnover margin typically wins the bowl games, because you got a lot of even matchups, and even a slight edge statistically can swing the game one way or another. So for Georgia Southern, they're 103rd in rush yards a game, not a very strong rushing game, but they do have Jalen White, who's been pretty solid this season. So overall, I mean, bottom line for Georgia Southern, a strong team offensively at times, but the defense, not so much. As for Ohio, 94th in points per game. This is a strong team defensively, kind of polar opposite as Georgia Southern. They're 6th in points allowed this season. They're 6th in pass defense, 10th in rush defense. I mean, you look at how this team has played down the stretch. They haven't scored a whole lot of points, but they've found a way to win close games, and that's what really matters. But they're 94th in points per game, 72nd in pass yards a game. So even when Curtis Rourke was playing this season, he wasn't a very strong passer. He did throw for 2,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, 5 picks, so not terrible. But this offense does just enough typically to get by. Your recent matchups: Georgia Southern lost to App State, lost to Old Dominion by 3, 5-point loss to Marshall, and obviously got blown out to Texas State. So pretty bumpy down the stretch for Georgia Southern. But when you look at how this team played in October especially, I mean, they did lose to James Madison, but they had 2 wins over Louisiana Monroe, and then a dominant win over Georgia State, which was maybe the most impressive win of the season. I mean, even in September, this team had a couple of really nice dominant wins. So Georgia Southern has definitely shown potential at times. It's just been kind of tough down the stretch. But as for Ohio, beat Akron by 11 there. Then they also beat Central Michigan by a couple of touchdowns. Beat Buffalo 20-10. Lost to Miami, Ohio 16-30. And turns out Miami, Ohio, really solid team this season. They just won the MAC last week, and then Ohio beat Western Michigan by 3 back in October. Your key points: Georgia Southern 6-6 after a 6-2 start. Were winless in November. That is a bit of a red flag when predicting bowl games. You got to look at how hot the team is heading into bowl season. If they've lost 4 straight, like Georgia Southern has, typically the bowl game might not go so well. But Ohio, on the flip side, they were undefeated in November. They won all 3 of their games, and that's something that's usually a green flag. That's something you look for. For Ohio, obviously Curtis Rourke being in the transfer portal, that's a big reason why Georgia Southern's even a favorite here. And that's obviously a key factor as well. I mean, he's been a significant player for this offense this season. But you look at the defense for Ohio, that's really where this team and the Bobcats shine most. So they're going to need to rely on the defense here and make sure they control the passing game, because that's the main way where Georgia Southern can have success. But obviously for both teams, this really applies for both. You need to prevent turnovers. I feel like, that's something in bowl games you typically see, is whoever wins the turnover margin typically is the winner of the game. So, for Georgia Southern, the defense has held the Eagles back this season. Ohio's not going to be a very high-powered offense here. So, for Georgia Southern, they just need to do enough to get it done and find a way to score points as well. But, for Ohio, if the running game has success, they should win this matchup. I really do think that, as I feel like for Ohio, they should have some pretty good success defensively. If they can find a way to get up to 25, 30 points or so, Ohio should have a win in this matchup. But with that, let's get the prediction here for Georgia Southern and Ohio coming up here in the first bowl game of the season, the Myrtle Beach Bowl. And with that, I'm going to be taking the Ohio Bobcats. 23-20 is my predicted final score. Georgia Southern's a favorite here, so this is technically an upset. But when you consider the way both teams have played down the stretch, Georgia Southern winless in November, Ohio won all their games in November, and also the Bobcats defense. That's really something that I think you can rely on, despite Ohio not having their quarterback and Rourke for this matchup. And so I think for Ohio, they find a way to win this matchup. It's going to be close, and I think it's going to be pretty low scoring as well. I've got 23-20, but I honestly would not be surprised if it was even more low scoring than this. And I will say this as well: if you're going to take the over, you're probably going to pick Georgia Southern to win this matchup. If you think Ohio's going to win, definitely take the under, because that probably means the Bobcats defense is really going to show up. And so I'm going to say Ohio 55%, taking the under, and the Bobcats to cover the spread in the end. But with that, let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup, your score predictions, all of that. My name's Evan. This is All Sports Central. Stay tuned for more from ESC. We'll catch you on the next one.